Web3 has expanded this potential, and we want to fill it to the fullest.
And that's exactly what we're going to be getting to this afternoon. To explore this topic further, we have Dr. Taylor Ben-Yahia, Binance Charity's Digital Communications Manager, who will moderate a panel with our guests on the power of blockchain and uplifting communities. So let's welcome them to the stage.
Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Before we dive into this amazing panel, I do just want to say that we were normally supposed to have Fereshteh Forough, founder of Code to Inspire in Afghanistan, as well as Elizabeth Lee, Deputy Director of Binance Charity with us. Unfortunately, they weren't able to be here due to some travel issues. We're very sad to not have these two incredible women, but very excited to get into today's panel. Yesterday, we saw so many incredible examples of how Web3 and blockchain technology are really changing the social sector. Scott, I think we'd really love to hear what's being done at Mercy Corps in the humanitarian sector with this new technology.
Great, thank you, Taylor. Hello, everyone. I'm Scott Onder. I am the Chief Investment Officer of Mercy Corps, which is a humanitarian aid and development agency. We work across 40 countries in some of the biggest crises that are happening in today's world. We have a team of about 5,000 people, and we work side by side with people that are working through poverty, crisis, and other challenging situations. I personally am leading Mercy Corps Ventures, which is a venture capital fund, and I set the global strategy for all of our crypto and Web3 initiatives and investments. So we invest in companies that are operating in emerging and frontier markets. We have about 40 companies in our portfolio currently, and we pilot test different real-world use cases for crypto and blockchain technologies in these emerging markets. In terms of the topic of the panel today, in terms of uplifting communities, we have an investment thesis that really focuses in on resilience and finding entrepreneurs that are building the kind of more resilient solutions that are going to help communities thrive in the face of adversity. So whether it's the climate crisis, financial exclusion, conflict, other disasters, we see a number of crypto and blockchain companies that are really stepping up in three different areas, really. So in terms of like leveraging composability, the interoperability, and kind of permissionlessness of blockchains, we're seeing that really affect humanitarian aid and how that's operated and delivered. We see it providing economic opportunity to unbanked people that are left out of the global economy. And thirdly, we see that Web3 and regenerative finance can create coordination mechanisms and incentives to address the climate crisis. So in all three of those areas, we're very active. We have an active portfolio of startups that are working. And maybe just briefly in the humanitarian context, we see when a disaster strikes, crypto and blockchain rails can be highly effective for delivering cash to people that are affected and often displaced by conflict or disaster. So we see certain enhancements to the efficiency of sending that cash to people in their digital wallets. There's more transparency because it's on the public ledger. We see greater settlement speeds, faster payments, and all of those make such a difference when somebody's really in that crisis moment. I'm interested to hear from Max and the panel here about how these types of solutions are being used in Ukraine, for instance. And then beyond that, I think once you've sent a payment to a person through their digital wallet, hopefully it's an unhosted mobile wallet, they can then transact and begin using that across a range of different financial services that can improve their livelihood. So maybe we'll come back to those later in the conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. I think we love hearing those kind of real-world use cases that have such an impact. And speaking of resilience, so Max, you're leading the Ukrainian Ministry of Digital Transformation. I think as the ministry's name implies, you all are quite open to new technologies and adapting those. Maybe you can touch a little bit on what you've seen in the social sector in Ukraine with these new technologies.
Sure, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Max. I'm just responsible for this virtual asset project in Ukraine Ministry of Digital Transformation. And when I joined the ministry, what we saw is even before the war, Ukraine had one of the biggest adoption rates because we got undeveloped securities market, not so much trust in the banking system, and also the level of technical skills is quite high among the population. But now, especially with the war and crisis, governments and public is getting even more receptive to the new technologies, and we see huge innovation potential, like in fundraising, in remittances, and in the public infrastructure, like registries, because we got a lot of cyber attacks, and that's one of the directions to work. So I'm also quite enthusiastic about the potential of the self-sovereign identification services, things like certificates for education, like NFTs and stuff. We're big believers in the power of education. In our vision, by 2030, we would have more than half of our population having practical Web3 skills, as well as financial literacy. So, that's how we see it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. You know, in talking about the Ukrainian context at Binance Charity, we wanted to do our part to help in, aiding the crisis. So we worked on the crypto-based cash assistance program for IDPs and refugees, as well as the Binance Refugee Card. And we want to take that even further, looking at how we can turn this into research and going further in education. So Andre, you are a professor who is really in the crux of this finance, technology, and so much more. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what changes you see in the educational sector thanks to Web3 and blockchain technology.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. I'm a bit of an accidental professor. I became interested, I joined academia a while ago now, or 10 years ago, but before that, I spent a lot of my time trying to answer a question, why do financial markets break down all the time? You don't really design something like that. Financial markets are human-made. They're not rivers, they're not mountains. This is something that humans make. Humans are very good at copying, and so if something is working somewhere else, why not just copy it and make it work? Because in countries where financial markets work, people live better, businesses do better. They could borrow money and live in and buy an apartment or house. They can start a business and finance it. They can go and raise money in the capital markets. Why not do it all around? How does it break down? And that question has taken me on quite a journey. I worked for the International Monetary Fund for more than a decade, basically going from financial crisis to financial crisis, looking at like what's not working. Pretty much everything wasn't working, And then the global financial crisis came to the US, and I joined the US government, worked as a financial regulator as we were redesigning financial markets. I was part of the team working on it. And and then my colleagues from academia said, look, you need to come back. You know a lot about that, so you need to teach students, you need to write papers, you need to make sure that that knowledge stays in the profession. So what is the knowledge that I'm trying to communicate? And the knowledge is that humans are a weak link in financial markets. Humans are always cheating, lying, trying to steal, they need to be paid bonuses, they need to be incentivized, they get sick. So if you can replace humans with math and code, maybe this thing works better. And a lot of the efforts that you see that's been happening in the automation of markets, automation of finance, and the regulation that's underpinning that are in some way related to that, that money and finance is software. It's code. And that is how we need to teach it. That is sort of how I sort of organize my courses and my research around that. But what's interesting about that is that once this code is deployed in such a way that it could serve societal purpose sometimes much better than traditional institutions can do it, because they're not designed for that. They're not designed to help people who left Ukraine with like a backpack, 2 kids, and a cat, and they have to be crossing borders, and they have nothing. They invested in real estate. That real estate is not valuable anymore, okay? Their biggest asset was real estate and their family. Their money is gone, their assets are gone, they're going somewhere, and all they have literally is that. We need to figure out how to make money for the future, how to make money work, not just in environments where a handful of people could amass a lot of these resources, but really work in situations that are resilient, that a lot of people are moving because of wars, because of global warming, because of floods. You know, half of Pakistan is underwater. Like these people just have to move. So what do we do, and how do we teach that? Because people I'm teaching now, they're going to be regulators tomorrow. They'll be running financial institutions. So that's sort of where I'm at.
Oh, that's fascinating. And I think so much of what you're describing has fueled the way that we see this kind of crypto-based cash assistance, where it goes directly to the end beneficiaries in a way that's very quick, with minimal fees, that's so traceable, very adaptable technology. And I know, Max, you've seen a lot of these real-world use cases in Ukraine and the impact that it really has had on uplifting that particular community. Can you share some of those with us?
Yeah, of course. All that nice Web3 infrastructure is for sure seen as the public good for us. And one of the biggest examples is the fund of the Ministry of Digital Transformation. Could you imagine people from all over the world sent over $60 million to the government-led fund? And that was like a robust, secure, transparent, efficient infrastructure for procurement. And that's not only government, it's private initiatives like Unchained Fund or Ukraine DAO. But also I can't not mention, and thank you for your initiative with 10 million for the refugees and IDPs for Ukraine. More than 15,000 people served. And can you imagine people like, as you mentioned, like they live in maybe with small amounts of cash that won't be accepted somewhere. It's hard to make payments or register a bank account really fast, especially in such circumstances. So it was really like a saving fallback plan B for many people. So that's for sure is one of the ways it helps. Thank you.
Oh, incredible. Thank you. Maybe, Scott, do you have some use cases that you might like to share that you've seen in the Mercy Corps context as well?
Yeah, happy to share a few examples. We actually worked with Binance Charity a number of years ago in a refugee context in Uganda. Uganda hosts over 1 million refugees, many from the South Sudan civil war. And we saw an opportunity there to deliver cash assistance in a blockchain-enabled way in collaboration with Binance that really, I think highlighted not only the opportunity to enhance traceability, compliance, to speed up payments and settlement, to do it in a low-cost way, but it also highlighted how important education can be in the user experience. And we see this with every company we work with now. You know, to Andre's point earlier, the potential for crypto and Web3 solutions to kind of change the substrate of global finance needs to happen. 1.7 billion people are currently unbanked. 1 billion of those are women. And what we see is that education is such a key part of how products can be designed. So I'm a big proponent of unhosted mobile wallets as being kind of that interface, that way to onboard not only the next billion people, but the 1.7 billion people that are currently unbanked. And from a user UX experience, education needs to be embedded in every product feature and every interaction that those users have. And so in use cases like cash transfers in Uganda to refugee and host communities there, we saw that, you know, every aspect of that journey, that customer user journey, could be woven, education and training could be woven in. And we have a company in our portfolio in West Africa called Ijara that's actually designing decentralized savings and investment products for low-income people. And they're best in class at incorporating education into what they're doing. They have an Ijara Academy that low-income people go through to identify how to responsibly save and invest and understand the risks that they're taking on and how to mitigate those risks. And you know, the examples go on and on and on. So maybe I'll pause there. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love the points that you've made about education at different stages as well for different types of people. There was a great panel yesterday on education at the heart of Web3 and how this technology can be leveraged to open doors to a wider audience for really fostering inclusivity and diversity. And at Binance Charity, we're so excited to be in an educational initiative with Simplon, which is a very inclusive tech school. So when we talk about how we can open those doors to a wider university, I'm very curious, Andre, what do you think the vision is for having more inclusivity in higher education, for example, thanks to these new technologies?
I don't know. You know, well, but I do know this. Let's experiment. Let's see what works. It certainly, we were thrown into an environment because of COVID where a lot of the educational offerings became available digitally. So that potentially makes them more wide-reaching. So that we should certainly take note of what could be done there. I think there's a bit of evolution that happened in education in just sort of how to approach it. I would say that business education in particular, I can't really claim, so I'm educated at Wharton, professor at MIT, professor at Cambridge. I'm like elite. So I can't really say, like, what do we do to take it out? But here's what we can do, I think. I think what we can do is to continue evolving and continue making sure that we develop content and get it out there and see how this content sort of sticks. One of the things, for example, that I see Binance is doing, Binance is an unregulated provider of financial services, is engaged in a lot of experimenting with different types of asset types that have previously not been known. Perpetual swaps, perpetual futures, something unusual, but you would see that there is a lot of action there. Experimenting with stable coins. Experimenting with, what we need to make sure is that we continue sort of experimenting and seeing what works. Because the traditional provision of these services is either very concentrated to just a handful of those who can afford time and financial resources associated with acquisition of this education, or it's provided at kind of like popular level that's kind of doesn't get you very far. It's just sort of I think there's a way for us to use digital technologies to experiment. I think people could see. I personally feel that you really, like, you can use the smartphone without knowing all the bits and pieces of math and software underneath it, and you can build apps on top of it, right? So that's kind of what I'm thinking of, you know, there's some core, and then on top of it, you just sort of build. Let people experiment. Let people go outside the box. That's where I sort of think we need to be. You know, again, these are not, you know, many financial institutions are thinking about that. And last point, sorry, I spoke too long. Very, very important point is values. Let's make sure that we have the values embedded in our education that are our civilizational values, our values that have to do with openness, that have to do with democracy, that have to do with accountability. Because these technologies could be used for authoritarian purposes too. They could be used to kill, they could be used to surveil, they could be used to do harm. So let's make sure that whatever that we're doing, we're offering freedom, as opposed to, oh yeah, use this and we'll know everything that you're doing.
Sure, it comes with a lot of responsibility. Yeah, absolutely. And I love your point about the hands-on aspect and how empowering that can be. Maybe not everyone needs to know how the technical process is working, but if you can use it in a hands-on way, you see how it can be used to improve your life, the lives of your family members in a very immediate way, especially in these times of crises. I think that speaks to a lot.
I built my courses on blockchain and crypto around demos. It's very difficult to explain the cryptographic hash functions to people. It's very easy to show them in a demo what that is. They get it, you know.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. And I wonder, just in a very global sense, because all of you are working in such different kinds of communities, I would love to know your vision for the future, how you see Web3, blockchain technology, uplifting your respective communities where you're working a little bit. Scott, would you like to tell us some more?
Sure, yeah, I'll take that one. Well, I think there's essentially 4 or 5 things that we need to get right to be able to have a more accessible financial system that's built on crypto and Web3 infrastructure. And I'm particularly excited about just how public blockchains and networks can create an opportunity for anybody to be able to build solutions on top through the composable, interoperable nature of blockchains. And for that to truly happen in emerging and frontier markets, we need to get right identification. So there's over 1 billion people that don't have a government-issued ID. I think Max was alluding to this earlier. Digital ID solutions can empower people to have an ID and to be able to have ownership over personal data and port that data where they please and share access to that data with whom they see fit. Internet connectivity needs to be there, of course, to be able to access a mobile wallet. And so it's highly encouraging to see the cost of mobile data is coming down. And then, as I talked about earlier, unhosted mobile wallets is a battle we need to win. We need to make sure that non-custodial wallets are not regulated out of existence or accessibility for people who need access the most. And then we need a thriving ecosystem of apps that people can navigate to once they've received a crypto payment. They need to be able to access savings and credit and have a range of uses like insurance or e-commerce or what have you. And to make this truly inclusive, I really believe we need to invest in diverse founders and ideas. So, only I think 2% of venture capital last year went to women-led companies. That needs to change. My fund is investing with a gender lens. Over half of our portfolio is founded by women. And to support developers and entrepreneurs in emerging markets is essential to get all the best ideas. So it's kind of those 4 things that we need to get right to be able to create a more vibrant financial system.
Oh, that's great. But I'm hearing a lot of optimism in what you're saying, so I think that speaks well for the future. And Max, how about you? Do you have a bit of a vision of how you might see Web3 and blockchain technology uplifting the Ukrainian community even more in the future?
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm quite bullish on the decentralized autonomous organizations, like digital cooperatives that can bring more equality and adaptability to the organization, especially when the property rights would be also manageable through that. I'm really looking more into the regenerative finance, like taking blockchain out of a problem to a solution to our environmental and sustainability issues, and also things like decentralized science, where we can democratize the access to the important intellectual property like longevity research. I think in the long run, that would be among the major innovations in the space.
Oh, fantastic. And Scott, I just wanted to add on to that. I know you've also worked a bit in regenerative finance as well. Do you want to add a bit to that?
Yeah, I think we're seeing just the beginning of just how high potential regenerative finance can be to address the climate crisis by creating incentive structures and solutions related to taking care of our natural resources, reducing carbon, and finding ways to enable communities to create new income streams that will improve their livelihoods to do so. So we've invested in a range of companies that incentivize communities to take care of forests, of their natural resources, to practice adaptive and regenerative agriculture by basically connecting those carbon offsets to carbon credit markets, and then connecting those carbon credits on chain, tokenizing them and putting them on chain. It's enabling smaller projects to take place, which we're really excited about. So projects in Africa and Latin America that might not have been able to receive financing just a few years ago, now can find ways to get up and running, and also provide that kind of carbon offset income stream to those communities. So that's just one area where we're really excited.
I think a theme in everything you all are saying is that we need to have something in place that's full circle, so not just the financial services, but how can they actually be used once they're received? Can we have these different programs in place, whether it's regenerative finance, education, reaching out to the community in some way? So it sounds like a lot of optimism, but a lot of work to be done as well. Andre, maybe a final word on your vision for how you see this new technology, perhaps in the education sector. You're working with young people on a daily basis.
So what I'm seeing is that I think we've passed the threshold where digital technologies, including in finance, in communication, where technologies that in some way were digital representations of three-dimensional physical reality. And we've crossed the threshold into the environment where digital interactions actually precede physical interactions. And once you're in an environment where digital interactions precede physical interactions, so sometimes, people go on, dating apps, and their first interaction with each other is actually not three-dimensional, but digital. They interact digitally, and then they decide, what they want to do about it. There are ways in which people meet, the way in which people communicate, the way in which people interact, consume content, produce content that is digital. It starts out digital as opposed to physical, and then it's no longer something happens in the digital domain, and then it has in the physical domain has a digital representation that actually happens there. And we've passed it, we've crossed that threshold, and I think we're moving into the environment in which more and more of these interactions will actually not even go into the physical domain. They'll just stay there. And they will stay there, and as they stay there, we'll need to rethink, and we are already rethinking, as we begin, continue, and end interactions, creation of value, creation of content, creation of knowledge, communication, consumption in a digital-only environment, what does it do? How does it change? Where Web3 comes in is that in a digital environment, it's very difficult to maintain scarcity because computers are very good at creating exact copies. So blockchain comes into that, in that you can have digital scarcity. And building on that, building on digital scarcity, and the scarcity of some of these experiences is happening, right? We're seeing that, but I think that fundamentally we're entering into the environment in which we will begin, continue, and end some of our sort of human journeys digitally.
Powerful thoughts. Thank you so much. Well, I think it's the perfect note for us to end on today. Thank you so much to our panelists. It was such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. And thank you all so much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.